Right, just waiting a couple more minutes for some folks, and then we can get right to it. So welcome everyone. For a lot of folks joining this call, you're here to understand what is design thinking and the design process, which we're all going to cover today. But we're also going to talk about the state of UX in between 2025 and 2030 to address a lot of concerns that you might have on the UX job market and why you sort of need the 60-minute UX design MBA that can help you learn the design process, apply the design process to the work that you're doing currently as you sort of break into tech and break into UX. So what are we going to cover today? We're going to talk a little bit about UXwoman and some of the courses we offer. We do offer a 7-month UX design MBA. Then we're going to talk about 4 UX design mindsets, shifts to have as a career changer or UX learner so that you can land a 6-figure UX job. We're going to talk about UX stories, how UXwoman came about, what our mission is, and then we're going to get into the meat of 18 tips for 0 to 1 UX and AI product design. So learning about what design thinking is and how to go about the design process. And then we'll quickly touch upon our curriculum and next steps. So UXwoman is here to serve women, immigrants, people of color, the LGBTQ community, and allies. And this is for folks who are UX learners and job seekers alike, folks who are interested in taking on a career change and learning some of those advanced UX topics along with the end-to-end design process. So I'm talking about product scoping, product positioning, business strategy, product and UX management, stakeholder management. And this is also for bootcamp grads and Google Coursera certificate grads. So we've had a lot of former bootcamp grads from other programs join our cohorts, as well as Google Coursera grads or folks who are currently taking the Google Coursera course. This is not for folks who are looking for that shortcut into design and who are solely looking for those UX job search tips. While it's really important to really, have all your UX job search deliverables aligned, this is truly for the folks who want to learn thoroughly the end-to-end design process and really understand how and why business and tech or operational constraints in particular has consequences to UX design and AI product design. So we really believe in ethical UX and AI product design. We believe in a holistical, multidisciplinary approach. It's not enough to just look at design in a box. And too many courses focus just on the UX perspective and just on the design perspective, rather than really considering how does design and the user perspective fit into a business model at a startup or consultancy or large corporate. So it's really all about that holistic approach. And the reason we need a holistic approach is because the job market, there's no shortcuts around it, is becoming more competitive. So there's some certain key metrics around the UX job market in 2025. And although it doesn't feel like it at this moment, the UX job market is projected to grow by 45% between 2025 and 2030, according to the World Economic Forum 2025 jobs report. And so there's definitely going to be, especially besides, UX opportunities and digital design opportunities, there's also going to be more opportunities to design AI products. So the annual growth rate for the AI market is currently 28%, and the AI market is projected to reach 827 billion by 2030, which means that there's going to be a lot more opportunities to design AI products as well. This means, as you know, it's always going to be a constantly evolving job market, that there's always going to be both concerns and opportunities in this space. So definitely, I've been hearing a lot of concerns about the UX job market and how things are evolving. So there's current estimates that approximately 300,000 tech workers were laid off from companies since 2022. There have been slowdowns in hiring between 2022 and 2025. Layoffs have also led to this really competitive job market, and there's been concerns of oversaturation in the UX market. And in addition to this, there's talk about UX teams and tech teams getting leaner because of AI and automation, streamlining processes at companies. And this change is just going to be inevitable, but this also means that there's lots of opportunities that we can focus on as well. And we have to consider both the concerns and the opportunities when really vetting the UX job market. So there's also going to be an increase in UX gig work and contract work, which is becoming more of the norm these days. And what this does mean is that UX designers will be expected to be business professionals in the future. So that means getting comfortable with running your own consulting or freelance businesses to make it, learning the business side of design, right? How do you sell the design process to a client? How do you get paid for your work rather than doing free work, which doesn't count as gig work, right? And then there's also growth in the AI market. So as scary as AI can be in terms of leaner teams and even, decimating complete industries in some cases, AI is also an opportunity, and there's AI product design, which is going to grow and evolve as a field over the next 5 to 10 years. So it's becoming more and more important rather than being a generalist UX designer or researcher to really focus on strategy and to focus on specific skill sets that are involving stakeholder management, UX management, product management, research, facilitating workshops. All of these skill sets are going to be so much more in demand at companies as AI takes over some of those more production related tasks. So really focusing on the strategy is what's going to get you to stand out in front of a crowd as a candidate. And that is your own unique, perspective that you bring to the table, and your thought process is not something AI can take away from you. And we also need to start to develop more focused on the growth opportunities within subfields of UX. So the key here as you are a UX learner or career changer is just to get really much more focused in this ever-changing, ever-evolving job market. I think we can pretty much be guaranteed at this point since the pandemic that it's constantly going to evolve, and we just have to get more and more comfortable with the constant change and evolving within the job market. So growth in the AI market means AI product design will, of course, grow as a field and evolve. And there's particular industries that are really, really behind. So as AI and tech is rapidly advancing, industries like healthcare and education and finance and government need UX designers now more than ever because they're unable to keep up with the rapid pace of tech innovation. And these sectors seem to lag behind in terms of digital innovation. So if you're looking for opportunities where they desperately need designers and researchers just to help them catch up to the 2000s or even the 2010s, go and look at healthcare and education and finance and government websites and even nonprofit websites. Those websites are still stuck in the 80s or 90s or 2000s when it comes to advancement. And at the same time, we're having companies like ChatGPT and Google AI and Netflix AI and Spotify AI take over and just push forward on the high tech realm. So we're seeing a lot of contradictions in the job market, but that just means there's more opportunity. And there's also going to be an increase in demand for inclusive design and accessibility design, even though it might not feel like it at the moment, especially because EU regulations are going to be tightening and holding companies more accountable around access and ease of use for all demographics. And most companies today are taking on an increasingly global perspective. So inclusive design will be crucial for reaching new markets. I know we're in this really strange world with tariff wars and almost like a push against globalization, but I don't think we can push back the globalization advances we've had over the last 20 years. And I don't think 4 years is going to push that back in any way. So that's just my 2 cents. Take it as you will. So I know we might all fall or feel into fear when it comes to changes in the UX job market over the next 5 years, but we need to think about it and reframe that fear as a necessary evolution instead. We need to keep in mind that change is a constant in our lives every day, and developing new mindsets, and that's why we're going to talk about mindsets in particular, will help us with tackling that change and uncertainty that we're seeing in our lives as well as the job market. And there's no denying that the AI adoption will cause more layoffs and maybe even definitely decimate entire industries. It's already happening. We're seeing it in headlines today. And we just need to be aware of it, but also really, as we're seeing this happen, really understand what helps us stand out as a unique individual with a unique point of view. And there's reports that, AI could replace an equivalent of 300 million jobs. While this is fear-inducing, it just means we have to keep abreast of how we can continue to differentiate ourselves and what we bring to the table as AI streamlines tasks. So AI, and also just kind of looking into the details of what AI is trying to replace in the first place. So AI is projected to replace the following types of jobs in 2030. So any jobs with repetitive tasks like data entry, basic accounting, customer service, jobs that don't require emotional intelligence, bookkeeping, assembly line work, jobs that can be physically automated to reduce cost or increase efficiency. So grocery line checkouts, retail inventory management, and then jobs that are likely to be replaced by AI by 2030 and beyond tend to be jobs like data analysts roles, receptionist roles, telemarketer, customer service roles, bookkeeping, cashiers, truck and taxi drivers, proofreaders, manufacturing workers, delivery drivers, security guards, market research analysts, pharmacists, legal assistants, and financial analysts. So just to kind of keep abreast of what's going on. The silver lining is that AI cannot replace all jobs, and we will all need to continuously learn and develop new mindsets to cope with these tech advancements, the constant change, and the uncertainty, not in just the UX and tech industry, but in all industries. And really lean into the mindset that AI cannot replace jobs that require creativity and unpredictability. The beauty about human behavior is that we're very complex, we're very contradictory, and we're very nuanced. And we might say we want one thing, but then do the complete opposite. We can be hypocritical, we can be messy, and that unpredictability is something that AI just cannot quite grasp at, right? So human behavior is always going to be unpredictable, and in strategic marketing and business and UX roles that require creativity, we also require understanding the irrational, the illogical, the unpredictable, and then create stories around it to really help our stakeholders wrap their heads around that irrational mindsets that our users have, or that unpredictable elements to our users that they can't quite grasp. And AI cannot replace storytelling, original ideas, and ideation skills. Yes, today I do use ChatGPT as a starting point of, get my juices flowing and see what's out there. But AI, even to this day, falls sorely short of the actual strategic work that makes an impact in a business or startup or curriculum. So that is one thing we can really lean into. EQ and empathy. AI cannot feel emotions. So roles that require an understanding of EQ and empathy cannot be replaced. Yes, folks are leaning too heavily on AI sometimes, in a way that is unethical, and we're going to talk about that. And there needs to be checks and balances in the system so that we do not overuse AI to the point where our ideas become unoriginal and not very creative, because overuse of AI is going to lead to that. And that's something we talk about as well. And AI just will never be able to help with complex human interactions. So roles that, require therapists, psychologists, event planners, grappling with multiple complex sets of human interaction, that's something that AI is just not quite capable of doing just yet. So we really need to embrace 4 key mindsets so that we can remain competitive in the UX job market over the next 5 years. We need to embrace change, evolution, and uncertainty, as scary as that might be. Design, as a design process, is all about reframing uncertainty in a product or feature launch by approaching the problem with a mix of creativity and logic, qualitative and quantitative methods. And we essentially, as designers, we are selling success in spite of uncertainty, in spite of fear, right? And we're still pushing for an ideal state in design. Designers are optimists at heart. And product and feature success is never really guaranteed in our world. So we have to embrace our failures and keep reiterating, constantly tinkering, constantly experimenting and striving for perfection, knowing we're never going to reach perfection. But great designers and entrepreneurs are very comfortable and thrive in that uncertainty. And they're able to navigate it and all its nuances. And so another aspect of AI is we might get stuck in a scarcity mindset about jobs, lost to AI, And really, if we're going to perform at our most creative, if we are going to find creative flow, we need to think and act from a place of abundance. So yes, the AI industry is projected to be booming by 2030. And while some of these consequences will include major job losses in certain industries and sectors, it also means new possibilities. So I think instead of leaning into the fear, if especially as we're going to all become AI product designers in the future rather than just UX designers, we need to lean into the possibility of designing AI products. And that means new and upcoming AI startups with promising design jobs. And to be truly successful, we need to start to convert that scarcity mindset into a place of abundance so that we ourselves can perform well and get our creative juices flowing. It's going to be very hard for us as AI product designers to fear AI and design for it, as opposed to designing from a place of abundance and no fear, right? If we're designing from a place of fear, I doubt that we're going to come up with our best ideas. I doubt we're going to have our most creative flow. So we need to really, embrace AI, think of AI from a place of abundance rather than fear, but we also need to become more independent. We need to become more business-minded UX designers. We need to get comfortable with learning more about UX entrepreneurship, service design, stakeholder management, product management, marketing and product positioning, sales, how to sell the design process, and really embrace the gig and creator economy. So the best designers create their own unique brand that stands for their specific expertise, mission, and values, and they sell and market themselves as creators, freelancers, and excellent employees. I follow, and I myself am one of them, a bunch of influencers in the design space who work at big name companies like Netflix and Google and Meta, but they're also building their own unique brands as creators in the gig economy. They also take on freelance projects, and I'm seeing more and more of that recently. I myself, after grad school, was in that space. So I was a UX manager for a little bit, and I'll talk a little bit more about my background. I was working at Disney. And I was also running my own startups and projects and taking on freelance work. So, a lot of designers today are unafraid to start multiple side hustles and projects. They're constantly tinkering both inside and outside of work or their full-time role. And they fail a lot, right? So I failed at 3 startups before I successfully launched Ideate Labs with a partner, and now UXwoman by myself. And I like to leverage multiple sources of income because that's what makes me feel secure and helps me create from a place of abundance rather than fear. And that's how I like to live my life. But I will also talk about opportunities and different avenues or careers in UX, depending on what your interests are. And I think the last mindset is that we really need to feel empowered and knowledgeable enough to start our own tech and freelance businesses so that we can really embrace the creator economy. A lot of the women who join our cohorts at UXwoman, the 7-month UX Design MBA, when they start the program, they're like, oh, I could never see myself starting a business. That sounds really complicated. That's not something that I could really take on. And then as they, start to build an end-to-end product from scratch in 4 months, it starts to sink in that this becomes more and more real and more possible if you break down a highly complex task into small, simple steps and things to do every week. So, it's not so overwhelming to build a full-fledged product if you are doing, one small thing every week to work towards that goal. And so by the time they end the program, they become a lot more comfortable really thinking about starting their own side hustles and businesses. And I'll show you some stories from our alumni. Some of them have even gone on to create patents for their work, which is really incredible. And I'm really proud of them. So as designers, we need to be flexible and we need to strive to find that work-life balance between full-time employment, maybe gig and freelance work, and tinkering with side hustles and small businesses. And of course, we would be so burnt out if we had to juggle all these things unless we were really approaching all of this from a place of passion. We need to, yes, cultivate multiple sources of income in the face of uncertainty, but we also need to keep building our creative flow and growing that, inner creativity within us so that we don't get burnt out. And work-life balance is crucial. And also really going after your passion focusing on your passion helps you keep that fire alive. So just remember, as designers and researchers, we can have a huge influence on the future of all product design, including AI product design and inclusive ethical design for global audiences. Let's hope govs don't put a tariff on digital products. I had to look it up, but yes, they can put tariffs on digital products. Let's not talk about that. So I wanted to say, as designers, sometimes in these large corporate systems, we might think that we don't have a lot of influence. But really, when design teams come together, they can have an incredible influence over the trajectory of an entire company. And I want to just present you the story, but did you know that Steve Jobs initially, when he was, they had just launched, I believe, iPods at that point, and Apple Music was doing really well, and his designers approached him with the idea of building the iPhone, and he actually thought that was a terrible idea because at that point in time BlackBerry had just come out, and BlackBerry, all the corporate executives were using BlackBerry to check their email on their phones, and so that was an offering that BlackBerry had that set it apart from any normal cell phone back in the day. And Steve Jobs was like, who would want to use the internet on the phone? That sounds like a terrible idea. Like, what could you possibly want to use the internet on the phone for? And he thought it was the worst idea, even though BlackBerry had come out, and his design team convinced him otherwise. And now we have the iPhone, which has changed the trajectory of the whole world. And it was thanks to the design team, not Steve Jobs himself. So just want to separate the myth from the reality, right? I think there's a myth that all these, big time CEOs are like innovators and they're creatives. Really, it's the team behind them that pushes them towards the reality, the boots on the ground, folks who are actually working on the product, but no one knows their names, right? We know the name Steve Jobs. We do not know anyone on the design team's names, unfortunately. And another thing to consider in this world where we glorify CEOs is that we live in an increasingly money-driven world where CEOs are chasing billions of dollars, hoping to save millions of dollars by cutting down jobs, costs, team budgets, and that's the world that they live in. And you might, there's some incredible teams with terrible C-suites, but who have incredibly creative teams beneath them, and people who are optimistic, who are driven by creativity and ethical product design. And there's this constant push and pull at all companies when it comes to, the money versus the user and balancing the two. So as UX designers, yes, we need to be the voice of empathy, and we need to balance business return on investment, or ROI, with building better experiences and outcomes for users that are actually beneficial to the users rather than hurting or harming our users in any way or having unintentional long-term consequences. And as UX designers, we need to be confident enough to start our own businesses, side hustles, gigs, nonprofits, when nobody else steps up to the plate to be the change that they want to see in the world. Again, hint, big corporate is based on interest. I will always go back to a big corporate job for the financial stability. I will always work within a design team to convince CEOs like Steve Jobs that their ideas need to be reevaluated or rethought of or reframed. But at the end of the day, when I work boots on the ground in my own company, in my own business, that's when I'm learning the most. That's when I'm having the most impact and I'm making the most change. And that is what really, really inspires me to keep going. And that really gets my creative juices flowing. And I think as you see that it's really tangible to be able to put a startup or business together and learn by doing, that's when you can really start to tackle problems that haven't been tackled yet and that really desperately need to be tackled today. So just wanted to share some stories from our mentees. They have gone on to design successful AI projects. So, and they're very multifaceted, multidisciplinary folks. So Ashley is actually a business salon owner and went through our UX design program to learn the end-to-end design process. And what she did was she worked with other salon owners, did discovery interviews with them, and she was able to scope an AI scheduler and product recommender tool for beauty salon business owners to maintain better customer relationships. and, upsell their customers after each gig or reschedule it as needed. And there's a huge gap actually in this industry within this tool set and this consideration. And so she's actually been talking to B2B software as a service companies to see if they would like to buy her product idea. She's actually created an AI-based solution or prototype that is a functioning AI prototype working with machine learning engineers. And she has also been interviewing at places like Curology to really, showcase her beauty expertise and her expertise as someone who can build products from 0 to 1. So there's no one path. She's pursuing multiple paths. And they've also, to kind of go into more of what her chatbot is, it's an AI product that can schedule beauty appointments, handle cancellations and reschedules, and recommend products post-appointment that are really relevant to that particular customer. And it basically increases the return on investment for the salon owner with more efficiently booked schedules and fewer cancellations, which really helps their business. And Ashley would know because she's a salon owner herself. And our mentees have also gone on to balance both entrepreneurship and corporate UX work. So Alia recently landed a UX research role at Reddit as layoffs have persisted, pivoting from market research. And a fun fact about Alia is that she has launched 2 startups in the past before she joined us. But now she's continuing to work on her newest startup or side hustle while at Reddit. And she's both an incredible entrepreneur and researcher, and she does not let herself get placed in a box. And so her approach has been land a corporate job for financial security and to grow as a researcher, but apply her skill sets from our mentorships towards building a side hustle or startup that is, her own unique software as a service product. And our mentees have also, transitioned mid-career. So they have gone on to rebrand to senior level UX research and design roles. Kristen rebranded to a senior product designer role and doubled her salary after being a graphic designer and art director for over 5 years. And she was able to attract new opportunities to showcase a more strategic UX process from her work. And Jennifer also landed a UX researcher role after being a therapist for over 10 years, again, showcasing her transferable skill sets and how they apply to UX research interviews and facilitating UX workshops in particular. So what is our story at UXwoman? I know I should have probably introduced myself at the beginning. My name's Samaya, and I'm the founder at UXwoman. I have about 9 years of UX expertise across startups, consulting, and corporate. I have specialized in research and inclusive design for brands like Disney, Hulu, Marvel, J&J, Squarespace, Ford, Meta, ABC, FX, and more. And I work for both startups, big name brands, you name it, consulting, everything. My early career, I know it sounds exciting when you say it that way, and I'll like name drop a bunch of brands, but my early career was actually really chaotic. So I studied mechanical engineering at Carnegie Mellon. I got my first job out of college as a customer service manager at a small ed tech startup. And that's actually where I met my co-founder, and we created Ideate Labs together years later. But at that point, we were the only 2 women at the company. And we just struggled in a very male-dominated world where, especially as new grads, our ideas weren't really well received or taken very seriously. And so, I then, left that startup to get my first UX job in research and consulting, where I started to work with some of those big brand names from Fortune 500 companies. And then I worked at a smaller e-commerce t-shirt printing company to set up their UX research practices. But I still felt that something was missing, right? In the consulting world, we're so focused on creativity, we're so focused on the design process that we tend to have blinders on, and we're just thinking about design and the user. A lot of UX courses do this too. And with those blinders on, you're not seeing the business strategy. You're not seeing tech and operations. You're not really even looking at service design very in depth. And you're missing a lot of the context of what's going on at the company. And that's why a lot of executives don't take designers seriously, right? There's been a lot of writing about design needs a seat at the business table. Well, we as designers have to sell design in business terms and put our creative mindsets into logical terms that business people will understand. So that's why I sort of went back to grad school. I went to UPenn and I learned business strategy at Wharton for about 2 years. I was freelancing at that point and working on multiple startups that also failed. And it was all a learning process, right? And it really, those failures and those startups really helped me learn about business and how to build a successful business. And then my mid-career sort of became more intense. As I mentioned, I started and failed at 2 startups. I realized, I thought I had wanted to go down the track of, climbing the corporate ladder and being a manager. Realized I actually did get my first UX manager role out of grad school. It was intense, lots of meetings. I was like, nope, I don't want to do this. I want to be an entrepreneur instead. So I once I got it, I realized I didn't want it, which is fine, right? You just adjust and you keep moving. And actually, out of ID8 Labs or out of grad school, I co-founded ID8 Labs with my partner. And this was the third attempt at building a startup. And finally, this startup led to a successful brand and company and business. And now, after a bunch of trial and error, 9 years of experience, I've learned about what I want, what I don't want. We grew ID8 Labs to about 50,000 learners, and then my partner and I split ways. She started her own UX community, and I founded UXwoman. I have built inclusive design curriculum and led inclusive design workshops for Disney, Hulu, Marvel, and that aligns with my values. My manager actually discovered me on a YouTube video. He saw an inclusive design workshop I had run for ID8 Labs, really loved it, reached out to me, connected. And then when I got laid off from one of my jobs as the UX manager, I reached out to him and I landed my first job at Disney, which is like, phew. And now everything I do really aligns with my values. I met really magical folks at Disney who inspired me to think even bigger than I had thought of before. They helped me, think about design from a more magical and aspirational perspective. And so I've now founded UXwoman based on my values and commitment, again, to helping women, immigrants, the LGBTQ folk community, and the BIPOC community break into tech. And so that is what our mission is. We're here to help folks break into tech and earn 6-figure salaries. And with that, I wanted to talk a little bit more now about not 20 tips, but 18 tips for 0 to 1 UX and AI product design. So the first tip is to learn to manage. I know we've talked about mindset, so we're starting with more of a mindset one, but learn to manage uncertainty throughout the UX design process. And in week 1 of our program, we actually talk about what is design thinking. We talk about design thinking examples and blue ocean strategy examples. And again, it's really important that, there's a difference between how creatives work versus how creatives sell the design process to corporate and to business clients and stakeholders and executives, right? So what you see on the top is our double diamond design thinking process. And what it takes is usually the first part of the diamond is focused around problem finding, need finding, and designing things right. And this is where we're doing a lot of primary research, secondary research. We're doing a lot of competitor and market analysis. We're distilling and synthesizing our insights into themes and opportunity areas. In the cohort, this takes us the first 7 weeks of the program. So we're doing about 8 to 16 discovery interviews. We're coming up with deliverables like user types, stakeholder maps, journey maps, service blueprints, process maps, storyboards, and a lot of different ideation before we finally focus our ideation on one MVP or minimum viable product at the tip of this diamond, right? At that midpoint where we've now consolidated all the problem space into finding what's the one right thing to build based on the biggest, most urgent problem our users have. And then we spend the next half of the curriculum designing things right. So now we have our one idea or one solution, and now we're coming up with multiple different ways to visualize that idea. We're doing more competitive analyses. We're doing things like card sorts. We're doing information architecture exercises. We're doing a lot of wireframing, user flows, prototyping, and really also understanding the business of design. So how do we pitch our ideas in terms of what has the most conversion rates in terms of our designs and how we can kind of showcase that. This is what we sell to our clients who are business minded, right? This like very clean double diamond process. What it actually feels like when you're in it is really this diagram below. And what you're really going through is a whole bunch of uncertainty. You're using a bunch of qualitative and quantitative data to become more and more certain and clear about your focus for a product. And that's when you finally come up with one concept, which is your MVP concept. And this is truly what it feels like as a creative, because when we're designing for emotions, when we're designing for unpredictable, chaotic, nuanced, complex, very contradictory people, right? We have to really understand their emotions, their values. But at the same time, that's where the qualitative data comes in. But we also have to present things in terms of success metrics to stakeholders. So that's where the quantitative data comes in. And we have to show them that this solution is going to win in the market. And again, to outperform AI, we need to understand the psychology behind UX interviews and stakeholder interviews, job search interviews, and even facilitating UX research or UX workshops. So the one thing that AI can never take away from us is our understanding of other people and the psychology we learn, the psychology we apply, even using trauma-informed interview techniques for more complex topics like PTSD, grief, sexual assault, kink and BDSM practices. These are all topics our alumni have chosen in the past, and they require a more sensitive approach when handling, conversations. And so there's actually an iceberg model around how people think and how people present. And what we tend to do is when we're in group situations, so when we're in focus groups, when we're in market research groups, when we're in public forums online, we tend to just showcase our rational thinking. That's our conscious state, right? We want to present the best versions of ourselves to whoever is looking to learn more about us. But the reason discovery interviews are so important and gather unique insights that help us create differentiated, innovative products is if we can really dig deep into the subconscious of our users and design from a place of emotion, right? Emotional design. So can we understand their attitudes, their beliefs, their instincts, their value systems? That's when a design really clicks with an audience. And so we have to analyze their body language and learn cognitive psychology principles to read participants and stakeholder emotions and true motivations when it comes to designing. And that's something that AI is never going to be able to do. And then we have to start to take that analysis that we have and synthesize interview insights into UX visuals like affinity clustering, user types, journey maps, storyboards to deliver that magic, right? Disney always talks about magic and delivering a magical story. Can everyone hear me okay? I think the internet was unstable for a second. Just give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Okay, awesome. Did I break up at any point? Okay, you can hear me now. Perfect. Okay, okay. Well, I will try and get back to where we were. So, once we really dived deeply into our users' perspectives and their emotional and psychological perspectives, that's when we have to synthesize and put things together to really tell a really magical story. So it's not just about the deliverable. It's not just about a user types matrix or a journey map. It's about how you tell a really magical story and how do we build that empathy for our users while conveying pain points and problems to key stakeholders incorporating that quantitative data to justify a unique business or opportunity in a certain space. So the Pixar storytelling method is really famous, and everything we used to do at Disney had to include magical storytelling. So that's what I want you to think about when you think about synthesizing your data into a story. And not only are we, telling a magical story that builds empathy, maybe is even a tearjerker in terms of like cinematic levels of storytelling and presentation, but we have to convey the impact of our designs by showcasing quantitative proof of the return on investment to business stakeholders and investors. So we're telling a two-sided story. We're telling this highly emotional, cinematic, magical emotional story about the user, but we're also showing how it's going to benefit the stakeholders. And we really need to show how we scoped our product idea, how we built a business model around the idea and a monetization strategy, and how did we prototype the product, especially an AI product, without code in a really cheap and affordable manner so that we can understand how users will interact with that product before we go build it. And how do we understand constraints around AI development? And then, also think about creating that unique and innovative business model for our ideas so that we can monetize it. So a lot of UX courses focus just on one bubble, which is desirability. And that's what the users want, right? Do the users want this? But in reality, the most innovative, the most valuable designs come from a multidisciplinary approach. And so we do have to think about the business perspective, which is its own circle. And that's viability, right? Should we do this? What's the return on investment? Can we monetize this? We need to think about the tech and operations perspective, which is feasibility. Do we have the resources to do this? How many resources can we actually use to build this idea? And it's only by having this multidisciplinary approach and understanding the full business model and monetization strategy and product positioning and marketing of our ideas, will we be able to build the most valuable designs. So definitely don't put yourself in a box and just focus on the user perspective. It is so much more than that. The user perspective is just 30%, 33% of design. And so finally, as you're putting together this multidisciplinary story, you're starting to scope your MVP and your product idea based on user insights, testing, and stakeholder and business requirements. And remember that our MVP has to be super simple, and our storytelling has to be simple so that we can build the most simple version of our product and get the largest amount of ROI for that product. And one case study that we cover in the program is Tinder. So before Tinder, there was, programs like OkCupid and Match.com, but they really fulfilled higher level needs, right? The folks who went on Match.com or OkCupid would fill in these resume-like profiles, and they were looking for, true connection, maybe even looking to get married. But Tinder kind of grew popular with college audiences. And what the founders of Tinder found was an emotional pain point. They found that people in colleges and college campuses tend to stick to their own social groups, right? There were lots of fraternities, sororities, extracurricular groups, classroom groups, but people wanted to branch outside of their main groups, but they were fearing rejection when they were approaching new people. And they didn't know how to connect to new groups or new types of people outside their original social circles without that fear of rejection, right? So when the only types of people who would, go up to people at a bar or hit on someone at a bar or talk to someone new at a new like group organization or meetup are the really bold, the really confident folks. Not everyone has that level of confidence that a couple of those folks have. And so Tinder noted that it was just this fear of rejection that was really holding people back from meeting new folks within their communities. And so Tinder wanted to solve that emotional problem of the fear of rejection. And so their MVP was super simple. They just wanted people to meet and connect by swiping right or swiping left and then getting to chat with them. And potentially that chat leads to something more. So Tinder didn't focus on a high level need like finding true love or getting married. They just focused on a simpler, much more accessible need, which was meeting new people in our life, whether that was for dating or friendship purposes. And that led to Tinder becoming, a big billion-dollar level company, right? And surpassing the success of companies like Match.com and OkCupid. And so, as we're thinking about scoping MVP, we also need to consider how we articulate and demonstrate the scope of AI features with AI heuristics and best practices. So now, thanks to us having access to large language models like ChatGPT and Gemini, we can actually incorporate AI features into MVP versions of our apps. But we have to think about heuristics and design patterns and design systems, and also the long-term implications of our ideas. I know I was talking about Tinder previously, but continuing on the theme of Tinder, I don't know if everyone has seen Black Mirror's Hang the DJ, but that talks about the future of dating, and it's a very simulation-based, algorithm-based AI world, which is really dark, but it also has a happy ending. So I highly recommend it if you haven't watched it. But we really, as designers, need to start thinking about the long-term implications of the apps we create, right? So Tinder, when it came out, was great, right? It solved that emotional problem of the fear of rejection. But there have also been a lot of unintended consequences to dating apps like Tinder. It's made it a lot easier to create catfishing profiles and fraud online. It's made it a lot easier to say rude or suggestive language in chats, right? Because people aren't meeting face to face. It's become a lot easier to just be in a gamified system and just keep swiping rather than actually having meaningful connection. So there have been a lot of long-term unintended consequences on the dating world as well that are kind of negative, and that no one really quite knows how to solve at this stage. So by the time we get to our midterms, we're basically presenting a 10-minute midterm pitch within our 7-month design MBA program, showcasing the research, business strategy, and design vision for the MVP product. And you might be wondering, why 10 minutes, right? Most corporate meetings last 30 minutes. And so what ends up happening is there's the first and last 5 minutes of every corporate meeting that's like intros and conclusion. That basically gives you, as the designer, 10 minutes to speak about your concepts and ideas, and then it gives the stakeholders on the call about 10 minutes to react to your ideas, which is why concise storytelling and being able to talk through an entire story is so, so, so crucial in the design world. Half the job in UX is how you communicate and sell your ideas and the design process. The other half of the job is how you actually go about the design process. So really, communication is a huge part of landing a UX job and being successful at UX, and learning to really distill your story. Have it be that magical story, but also tell the qualitative, emotion and the quantitative logic, but it has to be in 10 minutes. And this is also just a really good way of learning how to handle design critiques as well, right? You're going to be asked a lot of complex questions from stakeholders, and you as the designer or researcher have to be ready to answer any question that you receive. And so as we now move into more of the UI side of things, we have to consider UX heuristics and laws and competitors as we're building the information architecture of our MVP idea. And so what do I mean by competitors and laws? One really great case study is Netflix, right? So Netflix during the pandemic actually started studying back in 2021, a lot of their indirect competitors, which were, apps like TikTok and Spotify. And the reason they started to study indirect competitors was because they were losing access to users, right? Users were going on social media and scrolling on Instagram and TikTok rather than watching Netflix over the pandemic. I am one of those people. I spent hours on TikTok during the pandemic when it first came out, rather than watching a Netflix show. And what Netflix realized was that, TikTok made it very easy to just see one piece of content at a time. So rather than having to sit through multiple options and browse through multiple options, TikTok just presented you with content and you were engaged from the second you launched into the app. So Netflix actually debuted Play Something, which was kind of a feature inspired by channel surfing, by TikTok. And what you could do is just click the button and you were landed in a piece of content, and then you could skip that content if you didn't like it, or you could keep watching. And so that feature doesn't exist anymore. I think it's because it failed, but this shows you how some of the top companies continue to innovate and tinker all the time, right? Right now, Netflix is playing around with gaming in some of their visualizations of the homepage. So Netflix is constantly tinkering new ideas and new features. Some of them fail, some of them succeed. And this is showing you how a really innovative company like Netflix still applies competitor analyses, heuristics, and information architecture to their product. We also then, start to create a foundation for a design system that we need to build from scratch, starting with user flows and wireframes. It's really important to design products from 0 to 1 because then you're building a design system from scratch. And you have to work through the information architecture of your MVP based on existing user mental models and competitors. You have to categorize and organize information, and you have to thoughtfully build a foundation for your design system through wireframing and experimentation. And this is not a skill set that everyone is able to do, right? Most boot camps focus on flows for one piece of the app rather than the foundational design system. But when you start to build your own foundation, you can understand the modularity of your design system. And then you can start to see how you can scope your MVP to the simplest version of the product versus a slightly more nuanced product. And you can start to come up with a roadmap of how you will gradually increase the nuance of your features and build that product roadmap from the ground up, from a systems level. And it's really that understanding that's going to help you scope your designs accordingly, right? So by building that design system from the ground up, you're really understanding atomic design, components, and scalability. And really, it's so important to be able to understand scope and scalability because that's a skill set that mostly senior or strategic UX designers and researchers have. And it's not something that junior designers really get to play with or experiment as much. But how might you break down the scope of your MVP in terms of components and of atomic design? How do you understand the scalability of your product through design systems? And how might, designing it at an atomic level help us design AI features? And atomic design is so, so, so relevant to AI design. So consider that, we have to break down our design in terms of atoms, molecules, organisms, templates, and pages. And when we're looking at Google today, this is a recent Google search that I did, you're seeing all these modules, right? Google is playing around with the AI overview a lot, and they're almost deprioritizing ads in some cases by prioritizing the AI overview, and they're deprioritizing some of the individual posts. So you're seeing this one module, which is the AI overview. I can call that an organism. Then you see these ads here on the right-hand side. You have kind of a Google answer, and like they're pushing the Google certificate because it's Google. And then they're showing questions, right? This is another module, and they're showing visualizations, and then they're showing a community post on Reddit. So there's all these different ways you can prioritize the page. Remember when I talked about AI, I talked about a little bit, I touched upon designing for uncertainty. As designers, we cannot control what AI outputs, right? So the more we can give AI these organisms, AI will decide what to prioritize. So depending on the search, AI might choose to prioritize the AI overview module, or if the search is more social, like UX design commentary, maybe AI chooses to prioritize the social postings or some TikTok videos or some YouTube videos. So by creating things at a modular level, from an atomic design principles, we can then provide AI with more options to reprioritize what's on the screen, and we become better AI designers as well. So we also, as we're thinking about building and scaling this design system from ground up, we're also building a business pitch for why our UI will have the highest impact on sales, conversions, and engagement. And this is going more into the business of UX design. So how will our UI optimize user flows to increase efficiency, engagement, lead generation, and conversion rates? What does our design system do well, and how can we keep improving it? One example is Amazon and Hicks law, right? So Amazon has the shortest checkout process on earth. It has a one-click buy process, and it's actually the shortest process on earth because that one-click buy, the technical requirements around it, are patented by Amazon. So only Amazon can use the one-click buy, which makes it, surpass its competitors in terms of sales and growth. The only other company that I know of that uses the one-click buy is Apple. And Apple actually has to license the one-click buy for Apple Music from Amazon, which is insane. But this is the shortest checkout process, the one-click buy. And Hicks' law states the shorter the process or the fewer options that are presented, the more efficient the user will be able to make a decision. So most checkout processes tend to be 3 to 5 steps long, which means that we lose people, right, in the checkout process. With the one-click buy, you don't lose people. And so then we also start to think about creating that final prototype that tells a story while showcasing accessibility and inclusive design principles. So yes, we're building this design system from the ground up. We're thinking about the nuts and bolts and the business of UX, but we're also trying to tell that high-level story, that magical story at the end of the day that talks, and that one story needs to convey optimization, engagement, scalability, conversions, revenue, and we're selling a vision and scalability with our prototype. So how do we sell that vision? And I think Netflix is just a really visionary company, which is why it's one of my favorite examples. But think about how Netflix built their company from the ground up, right? They started really humbly with an MVP product or service that was basically emailing us DVDs from a library, a physical library. And then they went online and they built a digital repository of content. And then they took it one step further by starting to create Netflix originals like Stranger Things. And then they took it one step further by creating originals across different countries and cultures. They create originals in Spain and France, in India and Korea, right? And we start to be able to consume global content. We consume Money Heist. We consume the Squid Games. We consume, I think the most recent one that was showing up on my top 10 in the US was The Gardener, which is a Spanish TV show. So Netflix has really done a lot in terms of how they grow and innovate. And they're definitely one of the companies I love to learn from just because of how innovative they continue to be. And so now that our students have gone through this end-to-end design process, it's all about crafting a UX portfolio that highlights business impact and showcasing how you build products from 0 to 1. So by going through the UXwoman 7-month design MBA program, you get 2 portfolio pieces, one in research, one in design. And then we work with you to rebrand your past work into UX terms and service design terms. The next thing to do is craft a resume that really highlights those transferable skills and adapting your LinkedIn profile to match as well. So basically your resume, your LinkedIn profile, and your portfolio all need to showcase this one persona of a really focused UX professional. It's that one brand that we're talking about. Remember how I talked about successful UX designers and how they build this brand for themselves. These are the 3 deliverables that are going to showcase your brand, and those 3 deliverables need to look like one person as opposed to looking like 3 different people. And then that's when, once you've started to build a cohesive brand online and in paper, now you need to start to speak like that brand. And you need to speak in a way that complements your resume, LinkedIn profile, and portfolio. And recruiters are already going to be coming to you because of how you present on paper. And if you're presenting a strong enough brand on paper, but if you're unable to speak like that brand and sell the design process, your unique focused design process, you're not going to get the job. Think about it like dating, right? It's also about gaining leverage as a candidate. You want to create a unique brand. You want to showcase how you're unique, but you also don't want to come across as this overly desperate candidate. So when you think about it like dating, how do you gain leverage in a date, right? How do you gain leverage in an interview so that you're speaking more like equals, both evaluating each other rather than it being more of a one-sided evaluation? Never give away your power. And finally, we start to, as the program concludes and we get more into the career coaching side of things, we learn to scope and write UX project plans, set up contracts for UX freelance work and gig work. So as I mentioned, the market is so competitive today. We really need to also set ourselves up for success in terms of a like being a business and running like a business. So a lot of our mentees go on to get paid contracts and gig work that they scope for themselves right out of the program. And it's because they're confident with the end-to-end design process. They know how to scope their own UX work and work with stakeholders to execute on that design process. And then another aspect to consider is learning how to set up a viable business in 90 days to turn your MVP product idea into a reality. So why not set up a business and start to, turn your ideas into a side hustles? This is more about your passion and continuing to tinker, right? I'm not expecting everyone to succeed at the very first startup that they create, but I am expecting people to apply their learnings continuously. And that's what our alumni go on to do. And it might not be your first startup that succeeds. It might not be your second. It might be the third or the fourth or the fifth that finally succeeds, but it's all about how you're building the process, right? We really focus on process and action-oriented processes rather than the startup is going to be the end all be all. It's really about the process of setting things up. When I had to, pause on Ideate Labs and start UXwoman, I did it in 90 days. And it was because I have set up businesses 3 times before this. And I really know how to do it fast at this point. Um, Another thing to consider is troubleshoot your UX job search constantly by A/B testing your resume, portfolio, and LinkedIn profile. Again, in that career coaching, it's about the process and not the outcome. The job market is super competitive. We do not guarantee jobs. Nobody can guarantee you a job. If they are trying to guarantee you a job, I would look into the fine print because that doesn't seem very ethical to me, and there's always loopholes. But it's really about the process of how you find the job that's going to keep you getting jobs even after that first job, right? So we actually have one of our career coaches is Yasmin, and she is a hustler. She landed her first UX job from the cohort 3 months after graduating. She worked as a UX consultant for about 8 months, and then she got furloughed because we were at the height of UX layoffs. She hustled again. She had a really focused job search process. And within 3 months of being furloughed, she landed her UX researcher role with GE Aviation, where she is currently. And she's a hustler. She was at one point applying to 100 jobs a day, and she was able to streamline how she did it. Yes, with AI tools and also with the process of how she did things. So think about it more as how you troubleshoot your job search process rather than the end outcome, because you'll as a gig worker, as a UX tech worker, we're constantly changing jobs every 1 to 3 years, right? So that we can earn higher salaries. In fact, we have more leverage over getting a higher salary if we change jobs a lot. So that's something for you to consider. This is going to be a constant skill that you're going to hone rather than a skill that you need just one time. And so next steps, I know I talked a lot and I went a little bit over time, but basically I wanted to give you tips that would really help you understand the end-to-end design process with a couple of real-world case studies, and also see if you have interest in taking our 7-month UX design MBA. So we actually are running our spring cohort right now. Our fall cohort will be available in September. The live UX course cost is $7,450. You can pay that in a lump sum or installments, and you would essentially pay a $490 registration fee to save your seat and register, and then you'd pay the remainder of the tuition once the class starts. So the curriculum looks like 4 months of coursework, building a product from 0 to 1, 3 months of one-on-one career coaching, and then lifelong group coaching support with Yasmin after you finish. We also have the online version of the course, which will be available in June. And so the course cost for that is $4,950. You get access to all the online course modules and 14 one-on-one mentorship sessions. After that, you get access to our group alumni coaching support. So with that, I will pause there and stop sharing. And if you have any questions, let me know. It seems like we have a lot of introductions, which is great. It's great that everyone's getting a chance to network. And I'm happy to take any questions that you have now. Any questions? If not, we can wrap it up. I'll wait maybe 5 seconds.
Um, yes, I do have a question.
Yeah.
Do you suggest that we have a portfolio ready before we enter the course?
It
Because I'm
depends.
pivoting from another field, so I don't have anything.
You don't, it's not required to have a portfolio when you enter the class. We do cover the end-to-end design process, but we also meet people in different stages. So we've worked with previous bootcamp grads or Google Coursera certificate grads who do have like the beginnings of a portfolio, but they might not have fully fleshed out the stories within their portfolio, or they might have rebranded some of their past work, but the story isn't quite there yet.
Mm.
So we teach everything from scratch, 0 to 1 AI product design, but we also layer on the business strategy and the job search career coaching, so that you can, potentially start your own UX freelance. You can start a business with your digital ideas, and you can keep troubleshooting the job search in a manner that makes sense. So we really heavily, regardless of any path you go on, whether it's freelancing, corporate jobs, starting a business, the biggest skill set that you need to learn is storytelling and telling that really compelling story and putting together that magical story that is empathetic but also shows the ROI. And that's, if you can learn that, and you can learn the psychology behind human interactions, whether that's with discovery interviews, stakeholder management, UX management, team building. Those are skill sets that AI can never take away.
Mhm. Thanks.
I'm starting to see a few more questions. So, do you have one-on-one mentorship options only for someone who has already graduated from a UX bootcamp or certificate course? That's a great question, Susan. We do offer a 60-minute done-for-you UX design, UX resume rewrite, and you can find that on uxwoman.com in our services page. We offer a 90-minute UX case study rewrite session. So if you have a full portfolio, we can help you rewrite parts of that portfolio in 90 minutes. And that's also something you can find in our services. But I really prefer not to work in one-offs with people. I'd rather just provide free education like this one on YouTube and provide as much of it as I can, because for me, the one-offs don't make as much of an impact. If I can really coach someone through a process or how they build their process of troubleshooting the job search or building a business or building a freelance business or gig work or building their product, that's when I have the most impact. So that's what I prefer. But we do have folks who book our one-off sessions. Um, Juliet has a question. I've got a question regarding ethical design and dark patterns, especially looking at accessibility guidelines that will be enforced by the EU soon. I will say,
Hi.
Juliet, I am not an expert on EU guidelines, but I can answer, more basic questions.
It's more on your take about, let's say your boss wants you to um, implement a dark pattern, for example, the cookie policy button being way more prominent. Do how how do I present the business case of not doing that?
Yeah. Oh, this is a good one. And I have had to deal with it as well. Yes, companies
Okay.
love to incorporate dark patterns because, yes, in the short term, and the company is thinking short term, they're going to increase their conversions, increase their revenue potentially. But guess what's going to happen in the long term, right? Like when Amazon did the one-click buy, yes, they're getting all those revenues. They're making a bunch of money from us. But there's a backlash to it, right? Because then, we had PR, negative PR on Amazon that showcased how Alexa was just auto ordering things that it heard with a high error rate. And then that was a backlash on the company, and people started to distrust Alexa. And who uses Alexa today? I believe at one point, Amazon, I might be wrong, laid off their whole Alexa team or a big part of their Alexa team. So we like lost trust in Alexa because of the dark pattern. So you can make the case of how much they're going to lose in billions of dollars in the long term if users lost trust with them. We see the same, and you can look up different case studies. Banks have done this too, where they might have incorporated a dark pattern that ends up in the long run losing them millions of dollars, losing them large user bases, and generating so much negative PR or lawsuits, right? Ooh, a big thing. And this is in big corporate, this is all like they want to avoid lawsuits at any cost. So if you can show it could lead to potential lawsuits and you can find cases for your specific case, yeah, they don't want to lose money. I hope that helps. All right. And let's see. What do you think of the Google Coursera course for starting out in these careers? I'm a manager and I'm changing careers. That's a great question. I, I, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Tatiana. I would say the Google Coursera course is great if you're not yet sure that you want to join UX, right? So if you're still considering other career paths in tech, whether that's coding, whether that's graphic design, whether that's product management, whether that's UX writing, yes, take the Google Coursera certificate. It gives you a really great general overview of the design process, but it does not give you enough information to land a job as a UX designer. I would say once you are completely 100% sure that you want to land a UX design or UX research career path, that's when you should invest more time and effort and resources into getting a more detailed education in the UX space. Until then, do your, take classes, take all those free classes. That's great that they have those available, but only when you're ready to commit to UX as a career should you go deeper. And Amy asked, will our course cover any coding? No, we don't believe in covering coding because as a UX designer and researcher, I've worked across UX research and design fields. I have never had to code anything in the 9 years that I've worked in the field. I still don't have to code anything. I have found that focusing on skill sets like business strategy, storytelling, product positioning, product marketing, stakeholder management, UX management, project management, more, storytelling and people-heavy skill sets have helped me succeed in my career far more than more of my technical skill sets. And keep in mind, ChatGPT can code for us now, right? So do we really need to be beginner coders when ChatGPT is the beginner coder for us, right? I will say, though, that if you are going to look into quantitative UX research, you will be required to code in R and MATLAB and Python. And that is where, if you're going to specifically focus on a quantitative UX research career path, you will have to go deep into coding. We do not cover coding, especially in those areas. But as a researcher, I have worked on quantitative methods, but I've had the data analytics team code it up for me. So I've worked on more of the strategy for the quant methods and surveys that are statistically significant or A/B tests that are statistically significant. But I've not had to do any of the hard labor of setting up the tech. So as long as I bring the strategy and what we're testing and why we're testing, that's been more important. And we cover that in the course. Any other questions before we end? All right. Well, I hope you found this session to be meaningful and worth your while. We have one last question. I'm doing the Google UX certification, but have 4 years of experience in graphic design, including prototyping and wireframing. Do I need extra skills? So Christina, you actually remind me of Kristen, who's an alumni that we worked with, and she had about 5 years of graphic design knowledge and expertise, and she landed into a senior product designer role. I would say the skill sets that Kristen focused on were more of the strategic skill sets. So she already had the design chops. She already knew design systems really well. She focused more on UX strategy, business strategy, product positioning, the storytelling, and really creating that, magical pitch that involved both qualitative and quantitative data, showcasing, work, focusing less on branding, but more around information architecture and why she structured the product the way that she did. So I think those would be the skill sets to really lean into. Magdalena asks, in your online course, do you take into account different time zones? So with the live UX course, Magdalena, It usually takes place between 3 p.m. and 6 p.m. Eastern on Sundays. And that's the time we have found works best for our US market. We have had folks from Barcelona join us as well. We've also had folks from like South Korea and Japan join us, but they've had to join really early in the morning or they catch up on videos. We record every session in the live session after after we do it. So for you, Magdalena, you will be similar to our Barcelona students. It'll be nighttime for you. So 3 p.m. will be 9 p.m. to midnight your time. Or you can take the fully online course, right? That's the live UX course, which takes place on Zoom. If you don't want to do that and you're like, I don't want to be up at midnight on a Sunday night taking class, which is totally, totally understandable, then you can consider the video-based online modules. It really just depends on your learning style. We do offer the self-paced online modules for the folks who cannot make it or are not in our time zone. But again, learning style matters a lot. We found that the live UX course has been way more popular because people like the live environment. They like asking questions in real time. It holds them more accountable to show up if there's a classroom like this one. So yeah, again, it just depends on your style and are you willing to wake up either really early in the morning from Japan or stay up really late at night? Because yeah, we have to account for East Coast and West Coast times as well in the US. Any other questions? All right. I'll wait a few more seconds, and if there's no more questions, I'll be signing off. So thank you so much for joining. All right. Thank you, everyone, and I hope to see you in another session. All right.